As President Trump stated yesterday, he is still committed to placing tariffs on Canada, starting as early as tomorrow, possibly.
We're all trying to protect our future. Maybe it's finding a job that pays well, or buying groceries without breaking the bank and living the American dream. But what if I told you there's a hidden threat quietly creeping into our lives? Welcome to Economic Standoff, where big trade disputes and political fights can seriously affect your money, from rising prices on foreign goods to broken supplies chains that can shut down entire towns. We will show you the risks that most people do not see. And stick with me until the very end, because the final piece of this puzzle will surprise you. Think of this as your guide to avoiding financial trouble before it happens. Miss this, and you could be stepping straight into an economic whirlwind. Ready to see how it all ties together? Let's dive in. What happened? On a calm morning, Canada announced a major change in its trade policy. The government declared a new tariff plan that added a 25% charge on certain goods coming from the United States. It also set a 10% fee on energy products. These two countries had enjoyed many years of friendly trade and smooth movement of goods. News outlets reported on the sudden shift with disbelief. Trump is not joking when he says he wants to annex Canada. Those words coming from none other than the Prime Minister himself. Talk shows filled with experts discussing what might happen next. Ordinary families also wondered how this decision would affect their budgets and their daily lives. Some people worried about higher prices at grocery stores, while others felt proud that Canada was standing up for itself. Social media users voiced strong opinions. Within a few hours, the mood shifted from calm to anxious, as everyone waited for official statements. Many officials assumed Canada would never retaliate with such high tariffs. Yet Canada's actions showed that it was ready to protect its own industry's workers. It was an unthinkable step for a country that often relied on quiet diplomacy. By setting these tariffs, Canada sent a clear message that it would not remain silent if it felt threatened or overlooked. In that single announcement, the entire North American trade environment changed course. Is this really a surprise attack? For decades, the relationship between Canada and the United States was marked by mutual respect. They shared open borders, cultural connections, and major trade agreements. One of these was the North American Free Trade Agreement, updated as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. These deals aimed to make trade smoother. Many people in the United States believed that Canada would always cooperate and never break the peace, even if disagreements arose behind closed doors. However, Canada had grown uneasy with certain policies from Washington District of Columbia. Various announcements and changes seemed to sideline Canadian interests, leaving officials in Ottawa concerned about their own economic stability. Public sentiment also started to shift. Local businesses and workers urged the government to defend Canadian jobs, especially when they saw moves in the United States that favored American industries at Canada's expense. Though politeness had been the norm, the rising pressure made Canada rethink its usual approach. When Canada finally declared these tariffs, many American leaders were caught by surprise. They had grown used to easy talks or quick concessions. They never imagined a significant pushback could come from their northern neighbor. That illusion ended as soon as Canadian officials declared that enough was enough. NSE was new ground for both nations. Politicians in turmoil in the United States Capitol, the mood turned tense as soon as the news broke. Lawmakers rushed between meetings, trying to figure out if they should condemn Canada's move or try to calm the situation. Some politicians accused Canada of overreacting, while others blamed the White House for not managing the trade relationship more carefully. Behind the scenes, aides drafted talking points and prepared for what might become a larger dispute that could harm both economies. Televised briefings showed spokespeople struggling to answer direct questions. Many reporters asked why the administration had not seen this coming. One official insisted that the tariffs were a small bump in the road. Another warned that this was no ordinary misunderstanding. The public watched, eager for reassurance, but few found clear guidance. As different voices competed for the spotlight, a sense of chaos set in. Rumors spread of emergency discussions aimed at preventing a deeper conflict. Private sector leaders also urged Washington to take swift action to resolve the standoff. Some argued that the United States and Canada needed to sit down immediately and rework trade terms. Others wanted to double down on tough tactics to show strength. That disagreement highlighted the split in American politics: negotiate or escalate. Meanwhile, citizens worried about potential price hikes on household goods and disruptions to daily life. In this unsettled climate, each speech and policy move carried greater weight. Uncertainty became the new normal on Capitol Hill. Canada rallies north of the border, a different spirit prevailed. Rather than crumbling beneath the weight of economic pressures, Canadian leaders rallied their citizens around a shared cause. The Prime Minister spoke in a calm but firm tone, reminding everyone that these tariffs were not meant to harm a neighbor, but to protect Canadian jobs. Local radio stations replayed his remarks throughout the day, and newspapers praised the government's determination. In homes across the country, families discussed how they could buy more local goods to help their fellow citizens. Community leaders began small campaigns promoting Canadian products in grocery stores and online shops. Farmers encouraged people to pick homegrown fruit and vegetables, while small factories printed labels urging consumers to choose Canadian brands. Worries about the costs of imported items remained, but many believed a united approach would lessen the impact. Even children learned about supporting home industries, with teachers explaining how every local purchase could make a positive difference. Although some worried about long-term fallout, a clear sense of pride emerged. People saw this moment as proof that Canada could stand on its own, even when faced with larger powers. By relying on mutual support, citizens and officials alike hoped to find a fair solution. Whether the situation would resolve soon or turn into a deeper standoff was uncertain. The country's collective voice rang out. Unity in the face of a trade war. Pressure points. Canada has to respond to tariffs in a direct but careful way, focusing on specific United States products that can cause the most distress where it matters the most. Instead of placing extra charges on a wide range of items, Canada is looking at goods that carry political and economic weight. Bourbon from Kentucky is a perfect example. This famous drink is tied to a region with influential lawmakers, so any surge in bourbon prices grabs their attention and creates real pressure. Florida orange juice is another target because it comes from a state that is often important during elections, which makes higher orange juice prices a hot-button issue for both politicians and families. Perhaps the boldest step is aiming tariffs at Tesla, a company that is viewed by many as a leader in modern technology and clean transportation. Tesla relies on critical raw materials such as nickel, lithium, and aluminum, all of which Canada can supply or cut off. By adding extra costs to these resources, Canada sends a loud message that the United States cannot take stable trade for granted. Supporters of electric vehicles want cheaper and more reliable options, but each new fee makes these cars more expensive and harder to build. With this plan, Canada is not acting at random. Each tariff hits a spot that will be felt by lawmakers, industry leaders, and regular shoppers. By charging extra on bourbon, orange juice, and important electric vehicle materials, Canada forces the United States government to think about whether a trade fight is really worth the damage. This approach may look ruthless, but from a strategic point of view, a price for everyday people. The auto supply chain, if the modern automobile, is not built in one single place. Instead, parts travel back and forth across the border many times before a car is ready for sale. A steel frame might start in one province, wiring might come from a plant in a nearby state, and smaller components could travel to multiple factories during the manufacturing process. This design makes the system more efficient, at least when everything moves across the border with few barriers. Now picture a 25% charge appearing each time a shipment crosses that border. A single cost may not seem like much, but it adds up quickly when the same part is shipped several times. By the time it reaches its final destination, its total expense can be much higher than planned. That increase does not just harm the bottom lines of car companies, it eventually reaches customers in the form of higher sticker prices. Dealerships must pass along added fees, and everyday people feel the impact. As supply lines clog, some factories slow down or pause their output altogether. Managers may wait for delayed parts, raising worries about production schedules that are already tight. Labor costs do not stop during these delays, so companies might reduce shifts or lay off workers to cope with the sudden blow to their budget. The heart of this problem is that the North American auto system was designed around free and easy trade. Once tariffs come into play, each are story unfolding in smaller communities around those plants. Restaurants, repair shops, and local stores rely on steady business from plant workers and managers who spend money on meals. Groceries and services when production slows or stops. These smaller places suffer almost immediately. Owners who once counted on daily customers from a nearby factory now see empty tables or reduced sales. In many small towns, a major plant is the biggest employer. If that plant cuts hours or sends workers home, entire neighborhoods feel the shock. People who used to spend money at the local movie theater or sandwich shop might choose to stay home to save money. If this slowdown lasts, families may struggle with rent or mortgage payments. Small businesses might have to reduce their hours or close their doors for good. This creates a cycle of bad news, where fewer lesser jobs mean less spending, which leads to more closures. Communities often have a deep sense of pride in their local industries. Residents may have grown up hearing stories about parents or grandparents who worked at the same factory. Now, these legacies are threatened by trade disputes made far away in government offices. When layoffs or closures happen, it is not just a business story, it is a personal story of entire families losing their source of income. The strongest blow to these small towns is the feeling that they have no control over these events, yet they shoulder the heaviest burden. Canada's secret weapon. Although the spotlight often shines on car parts and consumer goods, there is a more powerful card in Canada's hand: energy. Large amounts of oil, natural gas, and electricity flow from Canada into the United States, helping to fuel vehicles, heat homes, and power offices. This relationship has served both nations for many years, keeping energy prices fairly stable and ensuring a reliable supply for regions that might otherwise struggle during peak seasons. If Canada ever decided to reduce these exports or add higher charges, it would cause real alarm. States that rely on Canadian oil for their refineries could see gas and diesel prices climb in a matter of days. During colder months, families living in northern areas might face bigger bills to keep the heating running. Businesses in the transportation industry would wrestle with higher costs, which they would pass along to customers. In turn, public anger would grow, and pressure on government leaders would increase. No country wants to cut off an important trading partner, and Canada may not truly want to bring about an energy crisis. Yet simply having this option gives Canadian officials a strong bargaining tool. If trade talks come to a standstill, the prospect of losing access to affordable energy might force United States leaders to think twice about escalating the conflict. Many trade battles focus on tariffs for finished goods, but the flow of energy touches every level of modern society. If heating and electricity are at risk, even a small policy shift can cause a huge wave of anxiety. By reminding the United States that energy security depends, at least in part, on smooth trade with Canada, the Canadian government gains a major advantage in negotiations. While they might never fully cut supply, the mere possibility can shape discussions and prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. A modern economy cannot run for long without dependable energy. And this fact is at the core of Canada's power. Grocery store turmoil. Why your bill just got higher. People across the country have started noticing a steady rise in the cost of everyday goods at their local shops. Foods such as fresh fruit, bread, and milk are not only harder to afford, but also seem to climb in price from one week to the next. Families who once felt confident adding a few extra items to their carts now pause to compare prices or skip treats altogether. Shoppers trade stories in the aisles, each wondering why their grocery budgets stretch less and less. One parent describes the moment she realized basic staples now eat into her weekly allowance. After picking up milk, eggs, and fresh vegetables, she looked at the final total and felt a wave of worry. Another shopper recalls skipping a usual favorite cereal because the difference of a few pounds or dollars mattered more than ever. Store owners cite import charges and tariffs as the reasons behind these price hikes. Yet few people expected such quick and noticeable effects on daily life. When paychecks barely keep up with rent and utilities, every bit of extra cost becomes a source of tension. Neighbors speak in hushed tones about how they might manage next week's list. And many fear these rising bills are only the beginning. The American car buyer's dilemma. Some people have also felt a new shock in showrooms where vehicles sparkle under bright lights. A brand new sedan, sport utility vehicle, or electric model might look tempting, but the price tag now includes hidden costs linked to trade policies. Components like nickel, lithium, and other metals often come from foreign places that now face higher taxes at the border. As a result, overall car prices have jumped, catching families off guard. An individual planning to buy an efficient compact car might find that the cost rose by a noticeable margin since the last visit. Others discover that more people compete for used cars, driving second-hand price higher than before. For someone who needs reliable transportation, the choice becomes stressful. Either commit to a costly new loan or keep an old car running a bit longer. Even if repairs keep piling up, dealerships try to offer deals, but consumers sense that these problems are bigger than any short-term promotion. The casual act of shopping for a car has turned into a balancing act between limited funds and the rising demand for personal vehicles. Families worry that tomorrow's prices could climb even more, leaving them uncertain about whether the car they need will soon be out of reach. Voters demand answers and leaders scramble. These price increases at the grocery store and the car lot have sparked deep frustration among voters on both sides of the border. Public meetings in town halls or local community centers now feature heated questions. Why should ordinary people suffer the ripple effects of trade decisions made far away? Parents voice concerns about feeding their children, while recent graduates find themselves struggling with higher costs alongside student loan burdens. Retirees who rely on pensions wonder how they will pay for medicine, fresh produce, and a reliable car all at once. Political figures who once praised tough tariffs face criticism for not protecting consumers from everyday hardship. Some officials defend their stance, arguing that these short-term struggles will later bring more jobs or better deals for the country. Others change their tone, sensing the anger that could threaten their chances of re-election. On social media, citizens rally around hashtags and calls for swift change, hoping to push leaders to revisit the trade measures. Grassroots organizers hold marches or sign petitions, determined to show that rising prices are hurting countless families. It has become clear that empty promises will not satisfy people who feel the sting of higher bills each day. With every public forum, politicians scramble to patch up their messages or propose quick fixes. But many voters insist that real solutions must arrive sooner rather than later, when tariffs divide neighbors. Beyond rising costs and political drama lies a quieter shift in how communities see each other. Long-standing friendships between people living near the border have begun to fray under new pressures. Events that once bridged cultural or national differences see fewer participants, as people worry about travel expenses or the general mood of tension. Families who once hosted each other now hesitate, concerned that casual chatter might turn into debates over who is to blame for the economic strain. Some schools that used to arrange trips across the border cancel programs, wary of uncertain fees or new customs rules. Local sports clubs or cultural fairs that once welcomed everyone now struggle to maintain attendance. Friends who used to swap homemade treats feel uneasy, unsure if buying foreign ingredients sends the wrong signal during these tense times. In many areas, a subtle sense of caution replaces the easy trust that once existed. While many hope diplomacy will resolve the trade conflicts, the damage to personal bonds is already visible. It may take a new spirit of cooperation to heal the worry and resentment that have bubbled up in neighborhoods where people used to feel at home on either side. Even if government leaders strike new deals, some fences between friends might remain in place long after the headlines change. Are other allies next? Canada's bold action has led many to ask whether other longtime partners of the United States might also respond with new trade penalties. Countries in Europe and Asia have paid close attention, seeing how targeted measures can pressure industries and sway political debates. Leaders in Europe have hinted they may protect their economies from rising import costs if the United States continues to create tough barriers. Officials in Asia have also noted Canada's moves and might coordinate with each other or strike fresh deals with Canada to reduce their dependence on American buyers. Mexico faces a tough dilemma. It has strong commercial bonds with the United States, but also sees how Canada stood up for itself. If Mexico copies Canada's approach, it could risk damaging its ties with Washington if it chooses not to act. It might miss chances to stand with other partners. Experts predict that a domino effect might leave the United States standing alone, confronted not just by Canada's measures, but by a chorus of nations unwilling to bow to higher tariffs. U.S. automakers in crisis. Major American car manufacturers like Ford and General Motors now face a shaky future. They rely on smooth supply chains and predictable costs, both threatened by tense trade disputes. Company leaders debate whether to move parts of their production overseas, even though that could stir controversy at home. Reducing operations domestically might save on costs. Yet, it could also lead to heavy job losses. Either path brings serious risks. Investors are growing nervous. Whenever hints of new tariffs pop up, stock values tend to drop. Suppliers tied to these automakers are afraid they will lose business if factories relocate. If no peaceful resolution takes shape, observers warn that these famous brands may see declining sales and a tarnished reputation over the long haul. What once seemed unshakable could soon become fragile, leaving communities, workers, and shareholders in a difficult position. China and Europe racing to fill the void. While the United States and Canada remain at odds, global competitors see a major chance to expand their influence. In China, certain firms already specialize in electric vehicle batteries and other cutting-edge technologies. If North American supply chains keep struggling, Chinese companies could step in with consistent deliveries and lower prices. That would give China more power in the worldwide automotive sector, possibly steering innovations and market trends. European automakers and suppliers also stand ready to fill any gap the trade conflict creates. By offering stable business deals and fewer political hurdles, they might attract North American clients who are desperate for reliable parts. In the long run, this could shift the center of automotive development away from Detroit and other traditional hubs. As every month of conflict passes, new competitors invest more in research and development, leaving American firms scrambling to keep pace. North America's future experts see two broad outcomes. In one scenario, the United States and Canada work out a truce that acknowledges their deep trade ties and common interests. Though they would both have to make tough compromises, such an agreement could reassure global markets, preserve thousands of jobs, and renew the spirit of cooperation that defined their past relationship. The second scenario is more troubling. If neither side relaxes its demands, the trade dispute may drag on indefinitely, with even more tariffs, legal battles, and political standoffs. Prices for everyday goods could keep climbing, putting stress on families and businesses. Foreign markets, meanwhile, would grow bolder and wooing North American partners away, aiming to lock in deals that last for years or decades. Some observers think the crisis may still spark new ideas. Maybe these tensions will push both countries to modernize their industries or invest in greener technologies. Others doubt these hopes, pointing to the deep divisions in government. For now, workers, business owners, and ordinary citizens all wonder which path lies ahead. Will the conflict end, paving the way for a united North American market, or will pride in politics close the door on peace? Each week seems to bring more questions than answers. Yet one truth remains. The choices made today will echo for many years, shaping how cars are built, how resources flow, and how nations trust one another in an increasingly connected world. For the sake of stability and prosperity, many hope cooler heads will eventually prevail. But where does North America go from here? Will unity return, or will tensions still worsen? Comment below with your thoughts on this unfolding drama today.